Hey guys, this is Miss Bridget. I'm back again with another reading lesson for you. I hope you're all staying healthy and well at home, and I miss everyone. I wanted to share with you our lesson for the week of April the 13th. And so we're going to be in our reading books this week on page 372. And our question for this week is, how can we protect the earth? So I want you to think for just a minute about how we can protect the earth. What are some ways that we can protect the earth? So I'm going to draw a diagram on our board, and let's list some ways that we can protect the earth. Well, this makes me think back to the story that we read when Miss Sarah was with us about Miss Rumphius. And if you remember, Miss Rumphius was very adamant about making the world a more beautiful place. And one of the things she did to make the world a more beautiful place was to plant flowers. And she mentioned 3 words to you guys when you were talking about making the world a more beautiful place. And they begin with the letter R. Can you remember those words? Reduce, reuse, and recycle. That's right. So those are our 3 R's about protecting the earth. Reduce, reuse, recycle. Remember, if you reduce, you're cutting back on our earth's materials that we use. If you reuse things, that means you're taking something that maybe used to be old, that you have taken the parts out of. Here I have a box. This is a box that I took ink out of to use for my printer. I can reuse this box and put other things in it. I could make it into something new. A lot of times people do that with a bottle, like a water bottle, plastic bottles. We do a lot of reusing when we make our STEM products. If you remember, when we do our STEM projects, we save boxes and cardboard tubes and plastic bottles, and all of those things we reuse so we can make it into something new. Our other R word was recycle. Now, to recycle means that you're going to take a product you've already used and you're going to turn it in so that it can be reused and made into something new. We have a way that we can recycle at our school. Remember, we have certain places that we can put recycled materials. And we have a recycling center here in the county. You can turn in paper or glass or different kinds of metal. All those things can be recycled. And they melt them down and turn them into something new. They can be reused to make other things. You may have seen a symbol that looks like this. On other products, and the mine's not too great, but those are arrows. And those arrows show a cycle. Remember, we talked about in science that a cycle is never ending. It just keeps going on and on and on. This is the recycle symbol. And some products that you buy at a store have that symbol printed on them, and it shows that they have been recycled. They have been made from recycled materials. So that's always a good idea to buy recycled things. So let's think for just a minute about how we can protect the earth. What are some ways that we can preserve the earth? Well, one thing that I thought about was to save water. I can save water by turning the water off when I'm brushing my teeth and then turn it back on again when I'm ready to rinse my brush out at the end. I can save water by not using too much. Sometimes that we waste things because we have plenty and we really don't think a whole lot about it. But, you know, our Earth's resources are very important, and we should always try to take care of them and save them, but also protect them. So another thing is keeping things clean. Not only saving water, but keeping things clean. about keeping our air clean? I think it's important that we have clean air to breathe, right? So if we keep our air clean so that we can have that air to breathe that is clean and it wouldn't be harmful to us to breathe in, that would be a very important thing. We talked about before, sometimes in big cities, they have smog and you can see it from a distance. It looks like gray, foggy stuff covering the air. When you look up at tall buildings, you can just see this haze all in the air. And that's called smog because in a big city, there are so many people in one small space. But you have lots of cars that put off exhaust, and you have buildings that put off exhaust, and those fumes get into the air, and they can make our air dirty, and they can cause pollution. So keeping our air clean is a very important thing. Think about, a lot of times people can ride to work together, especially in a big city. That saves the air because it doesn't create as much pollution in the air if people are riding together to work. Also, cutting your car off when you're waiting for someone, instead of just leaving it sitting there running and running and running forever, cutting your car off would also help keep our air clean. What about keeping our water clean? I think that's another important thing because we have animals that live in our water. And if the animals are in the water and the water is polluted, then the animals, they're not going to be able to live as well because the pollution can harm their environment. It can make them very sick and they can die from that. Sometimes you have what people call oil spills, and you have huge barges and ships that transport oil from one place to another. And if they have a crash or if they have a leak, they can leak that oil out into the water, and that water can make the fish and animals that live there very sick. It can cover their bodies and make it hard for them to swim, and it can make them very sick. And if the fish get sick and then we are fishing and we eat those fish, then it can make us sick. So it's very important to keep our water clean. We also drink our water. So you want to keep the water clean so that we can keep us safe too, right? Not just the animals. Let's also think about keeping our land safe. Keep our land clean. I'm sorry, not safe. I guess it would still be safe. We can keep our land clean by picking up trash, picking up garbage. Those are things that help save the environment also, help protect the environment. Certain kinds of animals will get into that trash and they'll think that there's food in there, and then it can get caught around their neck or caught on them, and then that can make them sick, or it can also cause them to die. So keeping our land clean is very important too. Another thing that I thought about when I thought about saving things other than water was saving electricity. If I save electricity, anything that we plug up is electrical. And so it produces electricity so that it can run. And so I can save electricity by unplugging things that I'm not using. If I have a lamp and I'm not really using it, it's not turned on, I can unplug it, so I'm saving electricity that way. Also, another way that you might think of that we do in our classroom, when we leave the room, what do? That's right, we turn the lights out. So when you turn out the lights, if you're not in a room, that's saving electricity. So all of these are different ways that we can preserve the earth. The earth has many resources that we are able to have and to use while we live here. Water, air, our land. We have to take care of those because once we use all of those things up, guess what? there aren't any more. And so we have to make sure that we protect our Earth's resources. On this page, you can see that recycle symbol that I was telling you about. That's exactly what these kids are doing. They're recycling these plastic bottles. So remember our 3 R's for protecting our Earth: reduce, reuse, and recycle. And so these kids are recycling bottles. That's just one way that we can preserve our Earth and our Earth's resources. Well, speaking of protecting our Earth and our Earth's resources, we have some vocabulary words this week that I'd like to go over with you. And one of those vocabulary words is the word Earth resources. So we're going to talk about that today and see exactly what that has to do with our story this week. So our story this week, it also involves those 3 R's, and we're going to talk a little bit more about those. But let's do our vocabulary words first. Are you ready? I'll show you a word, and I'll say the word, and then you repeat it after me. Are you ready? Curious. Distance. Earth resources. Enormous. Gently. Proudly. Rarely. Supply. So those are our words that we're going to be studying this week, and they are in our book, they're in our story, and we're going to be reading those as we read our story this week. Let's talk a little bit about what those words mean. On page 374 in our book, we've got some pictures and some sentences that help us to learn what our words mean. In the first picture, I see a little boy and his dad with a present, and it says the word curious. Well, curious means that you're wondering or wanting to know something. If you remember the stories we read about Curious George, we said that he gets himself into trouble a lot of times just because he wants to know. He's anxious or excited or interested in different things. If you're curious, you have questions and you want to know. I bet this little boy is curious about what's in that box for his present. The sentence says, I am curious to find out what's in the box. Our next word is distance. Distance means a certain how far away something is, a certain length, okay, a space. So if something is in the distance, it could be farther away. I see a little girl, and she's on a boat, and she's waving to another boat that's in the distance. It's kind of farther away. Lily waved from a distance, but her friend did not see her. You know, if I see a snake on the ground, I'm going to stand at a distance from it. I'm going to stand a little ways away. So when you think about the word distance, think about there's some space in between there. Our next word is earth resources. And we talked a little bit about that on the beginning. You know, when we talk about our planet and our earth and saving our earth, we want to think about our earth's resources. And I see a picture here of a lake and some trees. And then I see some clouds in the sky. Water and trees are important earth resources. So our earth resources are the things that occur naturally here on earth. They're not made by people. So the things that we have that are just natural in the earth, dirt, trees, water, rocks, those are our earth's resources. We also can dig into the earth and find certain kinds of resources to use, like fuels and oil and minerals. All those are important also. Our next word is enormous. If something is enormous, it's very, very big. When I think about the word enormous, I think about an elephant. You remember our measuring wall and how way high up we measured the height of an elephant? It was enormous. Well, this has a picture of a rhinoceros. That's another enormous animal. It says the bird looked tiny on the top of the enormous rhinoceros. It's so small you can't even hardly see it up there. Our next word is gently. I see a picture of some girls rubbing a puppy. When I think about the word gently, I want to think about the word carefully or lightly or easy. You know, you would handle a puppy or a baby very gently. Says the girls gently patted the puppy at the shelter. Our next word is proudly. There's a picture of a little girl with her painting. Proudly tells how she felt about her painting. Julia smiled proudly when she finished her painting. I bet she was very pleased with it, and she probably was excited to show it to someone else. Our next word is rarely. I see a picture of a desert, and it looks very dry. And my sentence says, it rarely rains in the dry desert. Well, rarely means hardly ever. If I think about that it rains rarely, and I look at this picture, I can tell it hasn't rained in a long time. So rarely means not very much, not very often. Our last word is supply. And I see a picture of some pencils and some colored pencils. It says the teacher has a supply of colored pencils for the class. Your supply are the things that you have that you can use. So these are our words this week, and we're going to be seeing them again in our story, and I hope that you can remember what they mean. I also have put a study page on our Google Classroom page for you to look at and study the meanings of these words this week. I want to talk about these words gently, proudly, and rarely. Let's think about those words for just a minute. Gently, proudly, and rarely. They all tell how to do something or how something is done. When I think about those words, I hear an ending on those words. They all end with ly. Let me find our cards. Gently, proudly, and rarely. When I see those words, they all end with an ly. Ly has been added to the end of those words. So those endings are the suffix. A suffix is letters that have been added to the end of a word, and it can change the word's meaning. Proudly tells how that you felt about something. It was in a proud way. Gently tells how it was handled in a gentle way. And rarely tells how often. Very rare. Okay, so part of the word helps you understand what the entire word means. When you add the ly, it changes the meaning just a little bit. The ly means how something was done. So I can think about how things were done when I think about those words. Those are very important when I think about a suffix. As I think about our story this week, our story is called The Art Project. And I want to think back to our big question that we had at the beginning. How can we protect the earth? So in our story, let's make some predictions. Remember that when we predict, we think about how our story is going to be. We tell about what we are thinking and maybe what we are expecting from our story. So let's take a picture walk and let's make some predictions about our story this week. It's called The Art Project. I see a lady and a paper that says art contest and some kids. And I see some origami, some things made out of paper. There's some more. So let's make some predictions. What are you thinking about our story this week? What are you thinking about protecting our earth and the art project? Can you predict what our story might be about? Let's think for just a minute. When I'm thinking about an art project, I'm looking at this picture, and from this picture, I can see that this paper tells me they're having an art contest. I can also predict that this is a teacher, and these are probably her students. And I bet she's telling them about the art contest. When I turned the page and looked at my other picture, I could see that they had made some art projects. I'm thinking that because this story is talking about protecting our earth, I'm thinking they're going to use some supplies that they already have. Maybe they're going to recycle or reuse some of their materials to make something for the art contest. Let's read and see. Let's read about how we can protect the earth in the art project. Are you ready? Look, the community center is having an art contest, said Grace. She was holding a flyer. Miss Simon read the flyer aloud. Everyone agreed they would like to enter the art contest. Miss Simon said, "Our classroom supply of art materials is low because it's the end of the year. I'll check with Miss Rice to see what she has." Miss Rice, the art teacher, didn't have any art materials. I won't be getting a supply until next year, she said. The whole class was disappointed. How can we enter the art contest without art materials? Asked Grace. Oh, I'm thinking that they're having a problem. Can you think of a problem that they're running into? That's right. Most stories that we read, there's a problem and then there's a solution. In this story, they're having a problem. The first problem they're running into, there's an art contest and the kids want to enter. But the problem is they don't have any art materials to use. So they're thinking they probably aren't going to enter the contest. Let's see. Maybe we can raise some money. We could have a bake sale, suggested Hal. I don't think there's time, Miss Simon said. Let's use paper in the recycling bin, Pablo said. Pablo did not often raise his hand. He rarely spoke up. So everyone was surprised when he offered an idea. What do you think about Pablo's idea? It's a pretty good idea, right? Hal said, I'm curious about your idea. I want to learn why you would want to use old paper. So we can save Earth's resources, Pablo replied. When we use recycled paper, we use natural materials and save trees. We can also use this old string and these wire hangers, added Grace. Now the class had to decide what to do with the materials. Pablo had another idea. We can fold the paper into cranes. Then we could attach the cranes to a frame and make them mobile. Miss Simon taught the children how to fold the paper into cranes. Then everyone helped attach the cranes to the mobile. On the day of the art contest, the paper crane mobile hung in an enormous community center room. The huge space was crowded with art projects. From far off, the class spotted their project. The crane mobile swayed gently as people walked past. From a distance, the paper cranes appeared to be softly flying. The judges checked each art project. They looked closely at the crane mobile. The paper crane mobile won the prize for the most creative use of materials. As the class proudly accepted their prize, they could not stop grinning. Grace exclaimed, "We made our art project and we saved the earth at the same time." Well, I think that these kids had a really good idea, and sounds like the judges really enjoyed their art project. As we think back to this story, remember the first thing that we did was we made predictions. We took a picture walk as we looked at the pictures and we thought about what was happening in each picture. And in our mind, we wondered what they could be doing and we thought about how they might be relating to our question that we were discussing earlier, how we can protect the earth. And as we thought about their art project and protecting the earth, one of the things that we talked about was recycling or reusing. As we began to read the story, we read that they had a problem. In that story, they had a problem of not enough art supplies. So automatically, I began thinking of a solution. Did you? When we talked about the problem, did you think about a solution? As we talked about using our 3 R's, reduce, reuse, recycle, you probably were already thinking that they could reuse some of the materials they have to make something. That was a good idea. Pablo spoke up and he had a solution to their problem, didn't he? His solution was to recycle or reuse some of their art paper that was in the recycling bin. And that's exactly what they did. They folded the paper to make these cranes. That is called origami. And they hung the cranes from the ceiling that made a mobile. And it made a beautiful art project. When we think about a story, most of the time the characters in a story will have a problem. It's very important to identify the problem and then think about if you were that character. If you were in that character's place, what decisions would you make? What would you do if you had been the children? And then you can usually predict what their solution is going to be. As we thought about their problem of not having enough materials, we thought about what they could do. And I bet you were thinking about what we do in the classroom when we are making something from our STEM projects. And we get things out of our cabinet and we use things that we have already used. Remember we talked about, turning our paper over on the back in class and using the back side of our paper to help save materials. You are all really good about coming up with ideas of how to do those things. I bet you were already thinking of a solution. And as we read about Pablo come up with the solution that we were thinking. They could reuse some of their old paper from their recycling bin. And they had come up with a beautiful art project. This is a great example of reduce, reuse, recycle. And it goes perfect as we're thinking about Earth Day. So let's think about this week what you can do to protect our earth. Are there other things that we could do to protect our earth? Remember our story that our list that we come up with? Keeping our land clean, keeping our water clean, keeping our air clean, saving water, saving electricity. Those are all good ways that you can protect our earth. In our story this week, I noticed that there was some dialogue. Dialogue is when our characters are talking to each other and there's conversation. If you notice in the first sentence, it says, "Look, the community center is having an art contest." And I noticed in front of the word "look," there are quotation marks. At the end of contest, there is another set of quotation marks. Quotation marks are a great way to signal dialogue. Dialogue is the conversation that the characters are having in the story. Well, these characters had a great dialogue when they come up with a problem and they solved it by thinking of how they could protect the earth at the same time. So this week, I want you to think about what are some ways you can protect the earth. Maybe you want to write in your journal about some things you could do to help protect the earth. Maybe you want to write a story and use dialogue in your journal. Those are great ideas. I hope to see you writing in your journals, and I hope that you're reading, and I hope that you're answering the questions that go with this story that I've put on Google Classroom. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.